Man, oh man, did I miss Miraidon EX. I had to take a small break from it after my blunder at the NEIC tournament. However, we're going hard at it again, and the second I swap back, we start top 8ing events, and I even won a League Cup with it as well. So that's the deck list we're going to be taking a look at today. And if you know anybody who wants to play Miraidon EX, feel free to send them this video, and I'll have timestamps also to help you out throughout this entire long video. And just a heads up, we're doing one quick giveaway in this video for the Carmine Regional Stamped Supporter card. We got this at the Baltimore Regionals. All you have to do to enter the giveaway is subscribe to the channel with notifications, hit that like button, and comment down below telling me what is your favorite deck box that you use and what is your favorite sleeves. These are mine. My favorite deck box right here is one I picked up in Japan. I have a lot more Japan vlogs I'll be releasing this fall, but we are really lucky, and so I bought this to celebrate. And then the sleeves I actually love to use. I also got from a regional at Indianapolis. These are some Japanese Pokemon Center sleeves for Miraidon. Miraidon EX is a really fun deck to play, and it's super beginner friendly as well. The last time I did a Miraidon EX deck profile, you guys loved it, and it was an anti-Charizard version which had a really strong matchup against Zard. So if you guys want to hear me out, I'll give you guys an in-depth explanation for every single card in this list. We're also going to be going over some of the strategies that you can usually go for when it comes to your opening turns and whatnot, and we'll also talk about some of the matchup spreads as well, and some tech cards you might want to experiment, and some cards I'm also testing with myself. I am 100% going to be playing Miraidon EX at the Louisville regional tournament in a couple of weeks, and without further ado, let's dive into the list. Starting off with these two right here, Miraidon EX. Now I am testing a third. I really did enjoy 3 Miraidons in my previous list, but for this particular version, we're just rocking 2 right here. Miraidon is a really amazing Pokemon card. It has built-in consistency for your deck with the help of its ability Tandem Unit. It has a beefy 220 HP, which is a very good number to have. It has the attack Photon Blaster for 2 lightning and a colorless. You do 220 damage, which is enough to one-shot KO a lot of Pokemon in the format, and we have some special sauce in this list which will make Miraidon hit some even higher numbers. Caveat here to Miraidon is you have to reset it out of the active in order for it to attack again, because it reads the attack here during your next turn. This Pokemon can't attack, so you have to use something like a Switch or a Prime Catcher, or, you know, just use something else on your bench to attack instead and retreat with your Miraidon. So the main reason we have Miraidon in this list is for the Tandem Unit ability. It is so good. It is a built-in VIP pass or built-in Nest Ball, built-in Buddy Puff, and however you want to look at it for your lightning type Pokemon. So it will allow us to set up and have strong starts no matter what. And we have a lot of ways to get Miraidon EX out onto the board turn 1, and if you don't get Miraidon on your board turn 1, it's usually going to be pretty tough, but you can typically, I really haven't had too much trouble getting Miraidon out turn 1. Always go second when you can with Miraidon. However, if you are forced to go first, which happens quite a bit, and I'm sure you've lost your fair share of coin flips, going first isn't as punishing for this Miraidon list as compared to your typical Miraidon list you guys have been seeing running around. So anyways, back to the Miraidon. We got 2 copies right here. Next up, we have our main attacker in this deck, Raikou V. Raikou V has been a pivotal Pokemon in Miraidon ever since its inception. It has a very cheap attack cost for 1 lightning and 1 colorless. You get to do 20 damage plus 20 for each bench Pokemon on either player's side, or both players' side I should say. You also have 200 HP, which is a little squishy for a basic V, but to make up for it you have the fleet-footed ability. If it's in the active, you get to draw a card, which is really useful, and you also have a 1 retreat cost as well. There's going to be times where you can chain Raikous. If you have a skateboard or whatever on 1, or you're going to use a Switch card at some point, you can get a free draw off of your Raikou sometimes during the game, so just keep that in mind when you are going to sequence your switching out effects. Raikou V is our main attacker in this deck because of its very cheap attack cost, the fact that we can just Tandem Unit this onto the board with ease. You can also slap on 4 Seal Stone onto it, and again, the attack does scale, so you can hit some pretty high numbers depending on how wide you're able to get your board. Raikou V is pretty much a guaranteed turn 1 attack going second for this deck, and before, the damage output by Raikou V was usually heavily limited by how big your opponent went on their first turn of setting up their board. However, we have the new stadium from Stellar Crown in this deck called Area 0 Underdepths, which is going to allow you to extend your bench to up to 8 Pokemon on it, which means you can scale up some pretty big damage. On top of that, because we are are going to be planning to use Tandem Unit and Area Zero Underdepths, we are able to thin out a ton of basic Pokemon from our deck, meaning our generators are going to be able to likely hit more likely onto those energies that we also need turn 1. Here is the Mewtwo EX that we have in the deck. Some decks are choosing to run 2. I just choose to run 1, and you have to have the Mewtwo EX on the board and the Area Zero Underdepths. If you don't have those 2 cards out, then your board doesn't get to go big. Typically, if you're able to get Area Zero Underdepths on your field, or eventually, set yourself up to have it out, you'll Tandem Unit with Miraidon, grab a second Miraidon, and then a Mewtwo EX, and then you can Tandem Unit your next attackers, whether it be Raikou V or the other Pokemon we're going to talk about. But yeah, Mewtwo EX is simply in here for its Terra typing and the fact that you can use Tandem Unit to bring it out onto the bench. Some drawbacks to Mewtwo is that it has a 2 retreat cost, which is pretty annoying. If you've been playing Miraidon for a while, you guys have probably know about the whole counter catcher or boss's orders stall onto a Flaffy back in the day. Oh, how I miss Flaffy. Flaffy had a 2 retreat cost, and sometimes your opponent was able to slow you down and steal turns by doing that. Well, that is a play people are doing again now with the Mewtwo EX on the board. So sometimes you're going to want to load an extra energy onto the Mewtwo in anticipation of a stall play like that. And do keep in mind, we only have 1 Mewtwo EX in this deck with no form of recovery. So if Mewtwo's gone, it's gone, and your bonus damage that you'll get from Area Zero Underdepths will be gone as well. But yeah, we have 1 copy of Mewtwo. Some decks will choose to run 2, and another card I have been testing, which is not included in this deck, is the new Terrapagos EX. Although it is not a lightning type Pokemon that you can use Tandem Unit on to grab and throw onto your board, we do have a lot of ball search cards in this deck, and so you're able to use either Nest Ball or Ultra Ball to bring out the Terrapagos. Another nice thing about Terrapagos EX is that it has a double colorless attack cost, which works well with the DTE that we have in our deck, or you could just put 2 lightning energies over turns. It has a very similar attack to Raikou V, however, it only does 20 damage for each Pokemon on your side of the bench, or on your side of the field, so it's not going to scale extra. However, you are able to with a full bench, and if it's 2 lightning energies on your Terrapagos EX, you can swing for, I believe, 240 damage, or 220 if you have the DTE attached. But yeah, another thing to think about for this deck is if you want to have a Terrapagos EX instead as a potential Terra Pokemon. Coming soon too, in Surging Sparks, we're going to be getting the Pikachu EX, and the second that Pikachu EX releases, we're taking Mewtwo out and we're putting Pikachu EX in. Next, we have Regieleki V and Regieleki VMAX. These 2 cards are the most controversial cards in my list. A lot of people are going to disagree with me by having it in, and then there's going to be some believers. So if you're a believer, I appreciate you. If you're a hater, it is what it is. So here we go. Let's start off with the Regieleki V. Regieleki V is a 200 HP V Pokemon, lightning type. So we can use Miraidon EX, a Tandem Unit. It's also a V Pokemon. I mentioned that specifically because it allows us to put our Forest Heal Stone on it, which is very, very handy. If you have Forest Heal Stone on your Regieleki V, that means it doesn't have to sit on your Raikou V, which you would rather have a Skateboard or a Bravery Charm on that instead. Next up, Regieleki V has the first attack Switching Bolt for 1 lightning. You do 30 damage and you switch out your active Pokemon to the bench. So this means for 1 lightning, 30 damage, you get to one-shot KO your opponent's Pidgey. If you have a Zapdos on the board for bonus damage, you can also one-shot KO Pokemon like Manaphy, along with Hoot Hoot, because those are 70 HP, so you're swinging for 40 times 2. Sometimes you're not able to have a strong turn 1 of attacking. For whatever reason, it happens, so it's good to have a contingency plan. By having an attack with Regieleki V that switches you out of the active, you can poke your opponent for 30 damage, and then also drop in a 1-price Pokemon, because you never want to leave a 2-price Pokemon in your active spot unless you're already going to take 2 or more prizes or take out a big noteworthy KO. Regieleki V is a sort of defensive attack, but it also has an actual defensive attack as well, which comes up and is very, very useful. There's so many use cases for it. I don't think I'll get into every single one, but we have the other attack here, Lightning Wall. It does 100 damage for 1 lightning and a double colorless energy. And the effect of Lightning Wall is that this Regieleki V will take 100 less damage from your opponent's next attack, meaning you're basically a 300 HP Pokemon V for that turn this is left in the active. That is very, very strong. It allows you to stay alive, and at some point, if this does tank a hit, you can just throw it away if they do remove the Area 0 underdepths from your stadium so you can get rid of this liability, especially if you choose to evolve it later on. You do not want to have a weakened Regieleki VMAX on the board. Now in this deck we do play Lightning and we do play double Turbo Energy. Now the exact energy count can change depending on what you want to do for your deck, but the fact that this does take a Lightning and a DTE is very useful because that means all you have to do is attach a single double Turbo Energy and hit a generator for 1, which is not too hard to do, and your Regieleki V is now a aggressive Pokemon as well. Next up we have the Regieleki VMAX right here. It is huge. It's one of the few VMAXs still left in the trading card game. So yeah, 310 HP, and you have the ability Transistor. Transistor says your basic lightning Pokemon attacks do 30 more damage. Your basic lightning Pokemon. All of our attackers in this deck, other than Mewtwo and the odd scenario, is a basic lightning attacker. So all your Pokemon will do plus 30 damage. This is very useful if you need to hit particular numbers with your Raikou V and your opponent decides to underbench, so they try to limit your bench damage, but you can be like, oh no, Raikou V with Regieleki VMAX is an extra plus 30. And if you have Zapdos on the board, you're getting an additional 10 more damage from the Zapdos, so you're swinging for plus 40. That is equivalent to 2 bench spaces on their bench being filled, but they're not being filled, and so you have this advantage of extra damage on your side of the field when they don't have a way to kind of turn it down anymore. Max Thunder and Lightning. 1 Lightning and a double Turbo Energy cost for 220. More than often, you're going to be swinging for 200 because you're going to have a DTE on the Regieleki VMAX in some instances, especially if you have 2, you're more likely to use this attack. But that also means, you just need 1 Lightning and a double DTE on it. So you could go Jenny for 1 and then have the DTE attach and you're cooking. 200 is a really strong number to hit because you can one-shot, of course, support Pokemon like Lumineon, Squawk, but there's some other Pokemon out there as well. And if you're able to swing for 220 with the Regieleki VMAX, you're able to one-shot Pokemon like Teal Mask Ogerpon, Fezandipiti EX, and the list goes on. The downside to this attack is it has the same effect as Miraidon, where you have to have it leave the active in order to attack again on the following turn. So you can always do a switcheroo kind of play, so your Regieleki VMAX can attack, but the best thing of all is it has no retreat cost. So you can tank a hit, retreat into a different attacker and swing with that, and you can potentially remove the Regieleki VMAX from your board through certain means. Now in this version of Miraidon, we are rocking a 1-1 line. However, in my previous version of Miraidon, we rocked a 2-2 line, and that's because there was a lot more V-Star Pokemon that were relevant in the game, so hitting that 280 with Miraidon was very easy to do, and it was also another way for us to boost the Raikou V, since that was the only other way we could really boost Raikou V with an extra 60 damage in total. I would be combining Regieleki VMAX with also annoying attacks like Luxray V's Fang Snipe, and you'd be swinging for like 40 or 60 or 90. It just went up and up, but you're also deleting opponent's trainer from their hand, so that's why we were able to cook Charizards back then, because we used the Luxray and Regieleki VMAX combo to take knockouts and delete trainers from your opponent's hand. So this is kind of a, well, not so much a control style archetype anymore, but we did have control elements in Miraidon, which is something that decks like Charizard struggle against. They hate control, they hate Snorlax, and so I was taking inspiration from the weaknesses, the exploits that you could find through other matchups and applying them to my Miraidon deck. Having Regieleki VMAX also allows us to attack into decks playing Noivern EX. Also, a lot of people are scared that he'll give up 3 prizes, then just don't evolve, bro. Don't evolve and you won't give up 3 prizes, or just wipe him off the board before it's too late. Next up, we have Iron Hands EX. This card is the bane of Jake Earhart's existence. A lot of people hate Iron Hands EX because of the attack amp you very much. This is the only way that Miraidon was able to take additional prizes from other decks, so it was really useful against those small baby decks with Gardevoir, like Gardevoir with Curlias in them, Lost Box. Now it's very, very important in the Dragapult EX matchup. Iron Hands EX, many decks run 2. I choose to run just 1 copy of Iron Hands EX, and the reasoning behind that is because we're going into a format where there's a lot of big basic Pokemon. There's going to be less and less decks like Gardevoir, like Lost Box, where you can really very much take advantage of Iron Hands, and so our deck isn't so much now reliant on Iron Hands. Iron Hands is more of a tech attacker in this list. I've even been testing versions of Miraidon without Iron Hands. I know, blasphemy, It's crazy, but Iron Hands isn't the end-all be-all, and trust me, when you start enough games with Iron Hands in the active and no way to really retreat it or play the game, it feels awful. So cutting them down to 1 also really helped our early game consistency by not having to start it, which is super handy. And again, Iron Hands is a tech attacker. You don't always need it, but in a lot of times when you're attacking into simple, easy one-prize attackers, Iron Hands EX is going to be the main Pokemon you're going to try and grab to initiate the prize race. But if plan A doesn't work with Thank you very much, again, we do have Raikou V for our plan B, and Raikou V is like our 90% success chance of hitting an attack no matter what. And then if anything, you can use Raikou V to soften up your opponent's Pokemon so you can amp them later on in the game. Arm Press is a very good attack for 160, but we're also able to hit higher numbers with Arm Press like 170 or 200 with the help of Regieleki VMAX, and of course, we have Thank you very much in here as well. For 1 lightning and 3 colorless, you do 120 damage, but if your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by this attack, you take an extra prize card. So very, very clutch. There's a lot of times where you're able to get some bonus damage on the Regieleki, on the Iron Hands from Regieleki VMAX and Zapdos to hit for some larger, more important numbers to take bonus prizes. And one tech card I've also been experimenting with is the Future Booster Energy Capsule. However, when I have been playing the Future Booster Energy Capsule in my deck, it feels really good to actually have 2 Iron Hands EX because you have more targets essentially for that capsule to land on. Next up, we have another tech attacker, you could say, Iron Thorns EX. Now, if you're not an Iron Thorns believer, or if you're just so scared of the Charizard matchup and stuff, then throw in the Iron Thorns because this is just super clutch against particular matchups, especially something like Charizard. However, I'll be honest with you, my updated version of this deck that I'm going to be playing at Louisville, I'm not sure if I'll even have the Iron Thorns in the list because there's just a lot of times I'm able to handle the Charizard without the help of Iron Thorns. I really don't feel like it's necessary, but it's just kind of a cope card in here to make some of the newer players more comfortable. Also, Iron Hands can be pretty expensive. Iron Thorns EX is not as expensive, it's like $1. Anyways, this card is also really strong if you are going first and you're forced to go first, then you can use your free retreat Pokemon or just find a way to switch into this and leave it in the active so your opponent has no Roblox abilities. Very strong against decks that use Roblox abilities like Radiant Greninja along with Teal Mask Ogerpon, Squawkabilly, and Lumineon. You're able to slow them down if you're not able to start the race going second, which is very handy. Now, do keep in mind if it's in the active, you're also going to be turning off your own Miraidon, your own Squawk, and your own Lumineon, so this is a double-edged sword style of Pokemon. The previous versions of Miraidon I like to play included Path to the Peak as well, so I enjoyed setting up my board and then dropping in Path to annoy my opponents. Now that Path is rotated, Iron Thorns is its spiritual successor, which I do appreciate with its initialization ability. Now it does have the other attack, or the only attack here. It's the same attack that Empoleon V once had, Volt Cyclone. It's 140 damage for 1 lightning and DTE, and it says you have to move an energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. So it's a double-edged sword of an attack as well. Sometimes you want to move that DTE, for example, onto an Iron Hands for the 2-hit combo kind of thing, or a lightning, for example, onto something else. But you do have to move the energy, don't forget. It does suck sometimes, but yeah, it comes with the perk of, you know, turning off your opponent's abilities. So you take what you can get. Another huge controversial Pokemon in my list is Zeraora, and funnily enough, if you look real closely, just a fun little Easter egg for y'all, these are all from Silver Tempest, the set Silver Tempest, and not only that, this is card 56, this is card 57, this is card 58. So when I do my deck list IRL, I like to put them all together, kind of a cute little inside joke, I guess. Anyways, what the heck is Zeraora doing in this deck? Doesn't it belong in the bulk pile? No, it doesn't. Treat Zeraora with love because Zeraora has clutched up so many times, and there's a reason he's in this deck. Alright, first off, Zeraora has 110 HP. Zeraora is a lightning type Pokemon, which also has a free retreat cost. There's not many lightning Pokemon that have free retreat right now in the game. Some others that come to mind would be the Miraidon EX with the collect attack and the attack that charges your bench Pokemon. And yeah, in terms of Miraidon, free retreaters, 10 unit, you can't really get too much, so Zeraora is a fantastic option to have. If you get a Switch Cart before you Squawk, you're able to Switch Cart into the Zeraora, and that way you can continue your plan after the Squawkabilly Squawk and Squeeze with more ease. You're not locked into going one way or the other. Having the pivot of Zeraora is very huge, and also if you start Zeraora, that is like the godsend thing. If you can start Zeraora or a Mew EX, for example, because if you have Miraidon or a Nest Ball or whatever, you just set up their Miraidon stuff and the Squawk stuff and you start cooking, and Zeraora is the mascot one prizer as well for this deck. So it has 2 attacks. We have Battle Claw for 1 lightning. Yes, you heard that right, 1 lightning energy. You get to do 30 damage plus an extra 30 30 if you're attacking into evolution Pokemon. And then the second attack here is Mach Bolt, similar to the Regieleki style attack and Iron Thorns attack where it's 1 lightning in DTE. You do 80 damage and you're probably going to do 60 if you're going to attach that DTE. Now do keep in mind these attack numbers do get boosted with the help of Zapdos by +10 and also Regieleki VMAX +30. There's a lot of times your Zeraora is going to be able to swing for 90 damage, which is very, very good. And the most popular use cases for that would be swinging into a Kirlia, and usually Kirlia is 80 HP. Sometimes it has less because it hurt itself with the Gardevoir's ability. So Zeraora is a 1 prize attacker that can swing into Kirlia. It can also swing into other Pokemon as well, just to clean them up in general. Having a 1 prize attacker is very useful to leave in the active, especially if you're able to take more than 1 prize from the Zeraora. But Zeraora not only knocks out Kirlia, it can also knock out Pokemon like Dracloak with the help of Regieleki VMAX. It also one-shots Pokemon like Pidgey for weakness. You can also one-shot Pokemon like Hoot if you have the Zapdos on the bench as well, which you probably can get with the help of Miraidon's tandem unit. Zeraora can also one-shot the Charmeleons that are 90 HP and Charmeleons that are 100 if the Zapdos and the VMAX are on the board. There's a lot of times where I want to keep the Zapdos as my 1 prize attacker later in the game potentially, and also just having that +10 comes clutch. So if I'm able to attack with my sacrificial Zeraora or attack with my Regieleki and then sacrifice my Zeraora instead, that is always preferred. So that's why I love Zeraora. Zeraora has never felt like a dead card ever and has always gotten me a lot of value. Zapdos doesn't usually attack, but sometimes it has to, especially if you want to one-shot Pokemon like Mimikyu without any capes on it or anything like that. And there are instances where you have the help of Regieleki VMAX to power boost the Zapdos. You're able to swing into Mimikyu for 140, which means you can knock out a Mimikyu with a Bravery Charm. It also means if you attack with Zapdos as a 1 prizer with VMAX out, you can swing for 140 times 2 into support Pokemon such as Lumineon V, Squawkabilly EX, and most importantly, Pidgeot EX. Zapdos is the other thick Pokemon in this deck, which has 2 retreat costs just like Mewtwo. So it's also another Pokemon you have to be careful and think about if you're going to worry about your opponent trying to stall you out with a boss or counter catcher kind of play. Zapdos also allows us to hit for 230 damage with the help of Photon or attacking with Miraidon's Photon Blaster, which is a very critical number to hit if you're trying to swing into Roaring Moon EX along with some other Pokemon in general. There's going to be times where your opponent will limit your damage to like an even number like 160, 180, 200, and sometimes you will need the Zapdos just to put you over that edge and hit the magic number of, for example, 190 for a Rotom V or 210 into a Teal Mask Ogerpon. That 10 damage might not seem like a lot, but it really hits hard when you're hitting the right Pokemon. Now, some players are also including 2 copies of Zapdos or 1 copy of Zapdos and 1 Vitality Band. Vitality Band is a tech inclusion as a tool for this deck. Some players use it for that +10 damage. It's searchable with Arven, and if you're able to get the Zapdos and the Vitality Band out, that's an extra +20 damage. But because you guessed it, we don't have Vitality Band in this deck, we have the Regieleki VMAX instead, we're getting +40 usually for our Pokemon's attacks. Next up, we have Squawkabilly EX. Squawkabilly EX is one of those cards where I've dabbled with the count of 1 to 2, but I feel like 1 is feeling pretty good for me with the way the list currently works. However, I know some lists like to play 2 for some extra consistency. If you play 2, I don't blame you. I see the reasoning behind it. Anyways, Squawkabilly is your favorite 2 prize liability on the bench because it really helps you play the game. You got 160 HP, normal type, so it is going to be resistant to fighting, which is handy in some cases, but you're also weak to lightning. Squawkabilly is also a card you probably do not want to try and use against the Lugia matchup unless you're really setting yourself up for success, because Squawkabilly is the go-to target for your opponent to use their Iron Hands and amp you very much. And if you're already he'll probably go for a Raikou attack on your Squawkabilly. Squawk's really good. It has an ability that you have to remember to always use if you need to use it, but don't forget to use it. If you forget to use it, you could screw up and lose a game to a Lugia player like me at Indianapolis. We don't have to talk about it. Anyways, Squawk and Seize, it says once during your first turn only, you may discard your hand and draw 6 cards. Very strong card. insane. So good for those turbo decks, and that's why it's in almost all the turbo decks out there, like Roaring Moon, Raging Bolt, and of course Miraidon. You also have the attack here. The attack doesn't come up very much, but it is a attack you can use in dire circumstances. Motivate. For 1 colorless energy, you do 20 damage, and you get to attach up to 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your benched Pokemon. So you are able to you know, have a more threatening turn the next turn. However, if you're attacking with Motivate, you're probably going to be giving up 2 prizes to your opponent, because Squawkabilly is very squeezable. Next up, for more draw, we got Radiant Greninja. Radiant Greninja is really good with this deck because of the amount of energy cards we have in it, and energy cards are sometimes useless as heck, so turning an energy into 2 potentially good cards is very common to do. And yeah, you'll also want to set up your Greninjas pretty early if you can. Do keep in mind, this is the go-to target for if your opponent wants to explode their own Dusk Noir. They're going to KO this for that 1 prize and also cripple our draw engine. And Greninja is another great 1 prize Pokemon you can just leave in the active if you choose so, because you don't really need Greninja all the time, but when you do have him, he's pretty nice to have around. You're obviously never going to attack with the Moonlight Shuriken for this deck, and it does have a 1 retreat cost as well, so do keep that in mind. There's a lot of times where I'll put the my escape board on the Radiant Greninja. Alright, next up for our draw engine Pokemon, we have Mew EX. Hello. Mew EX is fantastic as well. It's our 3rd free retreater in the deck. We of course have Zeraora and the Regieleki VMAX. Mew EX is one of the first targets you're going to go for besides Squawkabilly and Miraidon for your Nest Balls. Mew EX has 180 HP, weak to dark, but it has the restart ability here. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. Very, very good. There's a lot of times in your deck where you're able to thin your hand to a very low hand size, often 0 or 1, and you can even use Ultra Ball to thin out your hand, so you can go down to 0 and use restart for 3. Very handy. You also have the attack Genome Hacking, which is 3 colorless energies. You get to copy your opponent's attack. So you can use a Lightning and a DTE on this, and it feels pretty good. If you're not a believer of the Zeraora, which I hope you are by listening to my TED Talk, maybe a second Mew might be an option. The free retreat is just super handy, and having the Mew draw is super good. There's a lot of times where you'll have a 0 card hand, and you draw for turn, you get maybe an energy, then you can restart for 3, you can Fez for another 3, and then Greninja for 2 more, so you're seeing like 8 additional cards on top of your draw per turn. So going down to a very low hand size with these support Pokemon is not that scary anymore. Fezandipiti is so clutch. There's your TED Talk from Mew EX, Bingus boy right here, shout out YBM. Fezandipiti EX as our next support Pokemon to bring up. It has the attack Cruel Arrow for 3 colorless. It does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Not an attack that comes up very often, but sometimes it is useful. But we really just have Fezandipiti in here for the amazing ability Flip the Script. The ability that every Pokemon caster likes to go on and on about when they are casting Pokemon regional events. And it says here, if you had a Pokemon knocked out during the last turn, you get to draw 3 cards, and you can only use Flip the Script once per turn. So yeah, +3, very good. Say your opponent hits you with an Unfair Stamp or an Iono or whatever, maybe they just you know, leave you with a dead hand. Fezandipiti is an MVP, and Regieleki will tell you that after he almost took it out of his Lugia deck going into the recent regionals, but he got second, and Fezandipiti bailed him out big time. Fezandipiti also has 1 retreat cost, so it's also a target for our escape board tool for that free retreat, essentially. Yeah, Fezandipiti is amazing, and it's a card that you'll often see your opponents go for attacking first, so they can kind of cripple your draw engine, and is also another card that you want to attack as well if it's on your opponent's side of the field too. Alright, next up we have our Iron Bundle. Hi. Iron Bundle is our cute little deadly bird from heaven. It allows us to gust our opponent's active Pokemon away, and they're forced to bring in something else. So in a perfect world, they'll have a 2 prizer in the active, but we're attacking with our Iron Hands EX, right? And we need to take a 1 prizer with lower health so we can take that bonus prize card. Iron Bundle is here to make that possible. I have lost track of the amount of Iron Bundles that have sponsored Ampia very much. Such a great combo. Iron Bundle is a card you can also Nest Ball or Ultra Ball for, so you can set up for the Gust play in advance if you want to, or if you have Iron Bundle in your deck, you can play around that knowledge, knowing that you can Gust later on with the help of a Nest Ball. On to our last Pokemon for the list, we have Lumineon V. Lumineon V is amazing for that turn 1 consistency going second, we're usually going to grab an Arven, and if we're not grabbing an Arven, you're typically going to grab a Boss's Orders with Lumineon V. We do run 3 copies of Ultra Ball in this list, so there's a lot of times where you're just going to Ultra Ball for Lumineon for boss for game, but you can also just Ultra Ball for Lumineon to get other supporters, which are going to be helpful in your setup phase early on in the game as well. Lumineon V is a nasty prize liability, but the fact is that because we're able to extend our bench with the help of Area Zero Underdepths, that if they do bump our stadium, or if we choose to bump the stadium, then we're able to take off our bench's liabilities like Lumineon V and like Squawkabilly EX. So we're able to basically get away for free by playing these really useful support Pokemon, and then once the time comes, we just remove them from the board. And yeah, this is the stadium in question, the MVP that has unlocked this new level of potential for Miraidon, along with its new level of consistency, Area Zero Underdepths. We have 2 copies in our list, and again, we only have 1 copy of Mewtwo. So as it says here, each player who has a Terra Pokemon in play can have up to 8 Pokemon on the bench. If a player no longer has any Terra Pokemon in play, that player discards the Pokemon from their bench until they have 5. So you have to be very careful. If they do bump your Area Zero Underdepths like the first one, you want to make sure your Mewtwo EX can still be in play so that you can play the second Area Zero Underdepths later on, because we don't have any recovery. So if Mewtwo's gone, he's gone. Some players choose to have 3 Area Zero Underdepths, but the Mewtwo EX, I just find with how my games have been going for the last couple of weeks and testing and stuff, I find that 1 Mewtwo, 2 Area Zero feels pretty okay for now, and I've had no issues with the consistency or anything like that. And of course, you can always try the 1 Mewtwo along with 1 Terrapagos EX if you want to do that as well. And of course, you can always throw in a Super Rod if your Mewtwo gets knocked out. Next up, our energy count. We have 15 lightning energies in total for my Miraidon deck. I've seen some lists dabble with the energy count, but you want to have around at least 15 lightning. Sometimes 14 is okay. We do so much thinning, so our generators do have a higher chance to hit these days. However, we also run 1 copy of Double Turbo Energy as well to help us ensure that we're able to seal stone for Double Turbo Energy if we need to for the amp you very much. And Double Turbo Energy is just a very useful card in this deck. I find that I think I might be going back to 2 Double Turbo Energy and then 14 Lightning. Double Turbo Energy is very handy because of course we can use it on our Iron Hands, but it also acts as a pseudo switch. If your opponent bosses our Mewtwo up or a Zapdos, we can just have a DTE attach and retreat because it counts for 2 energy for the retreat cost. And going with a split of 14 lightning and 2 DTE doesn't feel too bad either, because we're able to attach this onto our Mew EX, our Regieleki V or VMAX, and yeah, so there's many uses. However, the generators have just been hitting really good with 15 lightning and 1 DTE, and typically the DTE will come in clutch when I need it. If I'm trying to go for an amp play, but then I realize my Seal Stone can't grab it because I maybe prized my only 1 copy, then I'm just going to go for a Raikou V play instead. But yeah, that's another reason you might want to have 2 copies of DTE, is if one gets prized, your typical Seal Stone target, which is often a DTE sometimes, you can't grab. So having that second one is useful. Again, it is a pseudo switch as well, which is very nice to have. Next up, we got the item cards. We have Prime Catcher as our ace spec to kick things off. Being able to use Arven to grab basically boss is so handy. You can also Seal Stone for it. You'll often use Arven for Generator and Seal Stone, and the Seal Stone becomes a Prime Catcher like 50% of the time. Prime Catcher is amazing. It's one of the best ace specs in the game. I do know that the recent Miraidon player who performed really well at a recent regionals over in Europe, he used Secret Box instead for a different type of Miraidon. It's a different kind of consistency style of Miraidon. Mine is just a very aggressive, and I want to swing into what I want when I want with the help of Prime Catcher. So you can choose Secret Box. Some decks have been playing Secret Box, but it's basically either between Prime Catcher or Secret Box for the ace spec choice, and I go with the Prime Catcher. There's also many times when you're going to attack with something like a Miraidon or the Regieleki VMAX, and then you can just Prime Catcher into your free retreat Pokemon, but also gust your opponent's Pokemon that you want per turn. Prime Catcher is just so good. I don't see a reason to not play Prime Catcher. Next up, we have 2 copies of Switch Cart. Some people might be asking, why not just switch? Well, don't you want to lose 30 damage off your Pokemon? It's pretty good, right? Switch Cart also doesn't work on Regieleki VMAX, but I don't care because Regieleki VMAX has a free retreat, which is a huge W. 2 feels really good because there's a lot of times too where you're going to Arven for the Switch Cart, and there's decks that have sometimes a decent matchup into Miraidon like Dragapult EX, we're going to want to use Switch Cart to shave off those 30 damage counters so they can't one-shot our EX or V Pokemon for 200 in the active. So Switch Cart is really good against Dragapult as well as some other matchups too. For Electric Generators, you have to run 4. If you run any less, don't play Miraidon. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Next up, we got some more consistency cards. We have 1 copy of Heavy Ball and then 3 copies of Nest Ball. So the reason we have a 3-1 split is because we have so many one-off copies of Pokemon in our deck, and so if we prize it, it feels horrible when we do. So Heavy Ball makes me feel less guilty about running so many one-off attackers or one-off Pokemon, and it also lets you save mental energy for prize checking if you do get to play this earlier on. And then we got 3 Nest Ball in here. The early game setup is so critical and so important. Yes, I know Tandem Unit lets you get 2 Lightning Pokemon, but we also need to use Nest Ball to grab important Pokemon like Squawkabilly, Radiant Greninja, Mew EX. Ultra Ball is also really strong because it's going to allow us to get Pokemon like Lumineon V. Ultra Ball allows us to also thin out useless cards from our hand if we want to have higher number of cards to draw from Mew's Restart. And of course, one of the most important use cases for Ultra Ball is to grab the Regieleki VMAX on demand. There are some versions of Miraidon where I've tested where we play the card Cassiopeia and we can bring ourselves basically down to a 1-card hand, play Cassiopeia, and get any 2 cards we want from our deck. So Cassiopeia is another supporter I've been experimenting with. For tools, we have a Rescue Board, a Forest Seal Stone, and a Bravery Charm. Rescue Board makes your Pokemon have free retreat. Basically, it lowers the cost by 1, and all of our Pokemon are 1 retreat cost or free, other than Mewtwo and Zapdos. So Rescue Board is really good, and if your Zapdos or your Mewtwo have 30 HP or less, it's automatically free retreat, which is pretty cool. Forest Seal Stone. Forest Seal Stone is busted. I've tested this deck with 2 Forest Seal Stones, and that feels amazing too. So I'm undecided on the Forest Seal Stone count, but Forest Seal Stone, you need it. It really makes your turn 1s aggressive. You're typically going to play Arven and grab a generator and a Forest Seal Stone, or whatever else you need. Maybe a pivot, you get Rescue Board, and if you know you're going to swing big, then you don't want to get knocked out right after, you're probably going to grab a Bravery Charm. Bravery Charm does plus 50 for your basic Pokemon. You're going to normally slap this onto your Raikou V, your Miraidon EX, your Iron Hands EX. Some decks choose to run 2 Bravery Charms, and I actually am all for it. Back in the day, Raikou and Miraidon, they used to run 2 Bravery Charms as well, so 2 does feel pretty good in a lot of matchups. It makes your Pokemon less one-shottable, and it means certain Pokemon like Radiant Charizard can't one-shot your Miraidon EX. It also means Pokemon like Bloodburn or Saluna can't one-shot your Raikou V. The list goes on. Bravery Charm, very good card. Next, we got supporter cards, starting off with Arven. Arven is our main supporter in the deck, so much so that we run 4 copies of Arven. He is always going to be our turn 1 card we grab, unless our hand is so cracked out in a different way that we can just grab a boss instead. I'd say you're able to get Arven on your opening turn like 80 or 90% of the time, whether you get it off the opening draw or if you just Lumineon for it or get it off of a Squawkabilly. Arven can usually come in and save the day. The cards we're going to grab with Arven always will be dependent on our opening hand and the Pokemon we have in play, but if everything's looking good and you have Pokemon like a Miraidon and a way to get Squawk on the board, then you're typically going to grab an Electric Generator, and if you need to switch your active Pokemon out of the active and you're attacking the active Pokemon, you want to grab that the Escape Board, the Rescue Board right here. But if you know you're not going to want to attack the active, instead of grabbing the Rescue Board for our switching option, we're going to try and grab our Seal Stone instead, so we can Seal Stone for Prime Catcher, and that way we're able to switch into the active and also boss Gus, basically the Pokemon that we want to. This deck is insanely good at attacking exactly what it wants for a particular amount of damage that you want to hit it for, whether it be a Raikou on a significant 1-prize Pokemon or a 2-prize Pokemon, or if you're going to go with an Ampu very much with your Iron Hands onto a 1-prize Pokemon, or a Photon Blaster onto a big beefy 2-prize Pokemon. 4 copies of Arven, MVP. Next up, we have 3 copies of Boss's Orders. Being able to gust your Pokemon that you want to hit is super useful. So yeah, we got 3 copies, and basically we have 5 ways to gust. We have 3 Boss's Orders, 1 Iron Bundle, and 1 Prime Catcher. Now again, we typically want to play Arven turn 1, and so sometimes if we get like a boss in our opening hand and we're gonna have to squawk it away, that feels awful. So there is a argument to try or at least test out running only 2 Boss's Orders, and and you could even put in a PAL pad as well, so you have more bosses for like late game consistency. Some other cards that I'm testing, which I'll probably talk about later on, is Chorus's Tenacity and also Separate Maniac's Code Breaking. And then our last supporter for the list is a Iono. Iono is super good, especially if we have it opening hand and we don't want to squawk away what we have because it's too valuable. Iono is able to bail us out of some painful squawks. We're also able to play Iono late game. Late game is super important to try and Iono your opponent to like 1 to 3 cards depending on the situation. Could potentially switch in a Professor's Research for the Iono and go even more turbo. However, I feel like my deck's consistency is already really strong, so just in case, having that mid to late game disruption with Iono is very useful to have, and I really do prefer to have Iono in the deck. I'll also have the full deck in the description down below if you want to copy and paste it into Pokemon Trading Card Game Live, so you can just start playing some games. Next up, we're going to talk about some cards you might want to include in your own Miraidon testing. Some cards I've been testing out include Zapdos EX. We also have Magnezone V and V-Star. I think these cards are very strong in the current meta, given some decks are cutting Manaphy from their list, and if they do have to play Manaphy in the early game, that means they're setting up one less of their main cards, which means they're getting slowed down, which means they have one less of their main cards on the board. It's nice that Miraidon can take bonus prizes outside of Ampy very much by having cards like Zapdos EX and Magnezone V-Star in its arsenal. If you wanted to go the Magnezone V-Star route, if you are going first, you're able to set up the Magnezone V and apply pressure that way, and that way if they don't set up a Manaphy, your Magnezone V-Star could potentially take 2 prizes on 2 baby Pokemon on their side of the field. So another way to take 2 prizes at once for a really low attack cost of 2 lightning energy. Some other lightning Pokemon to consider for Miraidon EX also include the single prize Morpeko that has like this really cool like Nestash style of ability where you get to look at the top card of your deck, and if it is of your liking, you can just leave it there, and if you don't like it, you can discard it. So you can increase your odds of hitting your electric generators with the help of Morpeko. It's also a 1 prize attacker, and it also has a motivate style attack where you get to charge up 2 energies from your discard pile onto your Pokemon. So if your turn 1 ends up being really rough and really bad, being able to attack with Morpeko and at least set up your bench and still leave a 1 prizer is a good kind of plan D or plan E. Some of the cards that are very notable in Miraidon that I chose not to play in this particular version of my Miraidon list include Raikou V. Raikou V was a critical part to Miraidon at one point. Being able to have a big 1/8 KO attacker in Raikou is strong. Also being able to pair that with Regieleki VMAX's bonus damage was also pretty handy. And another big notable inclusion or exclusion of this list was the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. Yes, some people call me crazy for not having the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX in this deck. Blood Moon Ursaluna is a very strong late game attacker. However, this deck is a very aggressive deck, so we want those starts to be fiery hot. Those first, those second, those third turns have to be excellent. Having the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX is going to slow you down sometimes. Having that big retreat cost gets in the way, and by having Blood Moon Ursaluna in our deck, it is one more Pokemon that's not Miraidon or the free retreat Pokemon that we want to have in our active at the opening start, so it's one less bad starter that we could get stuck with as well. Now, there is great merit to have Blood Moon Ursaluna. There's a lot of times where you can just use Nest Ball for your Blood Moon and then attach an energy and then boss for a game, but usually we're able to close out our games pretty quickly with this version of Miraidon. And if we do need to hit those big clutch numbers of like 240 at the end game, we're usually able to hit those higher end game numbers with the help of Raikou V, Area 0 under depths with Mewtwo EX on the board, or a Miraidon EX with a Photon Blaster attack with the help of Regieleki VMAX. We'll go over some of the matchup spreads right now for some of the most popular kind of decks that come to mind. We'll start off with Roaring Moon EX. We are favored into Roaring Moon EX if we're able to set up that Zapdos and swing for the 230 into Roaring Moon, or just our Raikou Vs can hit for some pretty big numbers into Roaring Moon. We are the favored to beat down in that matchup, which feels really nice. Regidrago V-Star. Regidrago V-Star has fallen off in popularity for Stellar Crown. However, it is still a very strong and popular deck. Our matchup against this is pretty strong, maybe like a 65-35, 70-30, just because we're so easily able to hit those big 2 prize Pokemon on their side and get those guaranteed 2 prizes on our first turn of attacking, whether we're donking a a Regieleki V, or if we're hitting a Teal Mask or a Squawk or whatever, we're really nicely favored into those big 2-prize only decks because it's so easy to pull off those consistent turn 1 attacks. Next up, Snorlax Stall. Snorlax Stall can be a little bit of a scary matchup if we do get stalled out with a Pokemon like Greninja in the active. So we're going to try and make sure we flood our bench as quick as we can so all of our Pokemon are useful to attack with. We'll usually get like a Miraidon, Mew-EX, a Raikou V, an Iron Hands, Zapdos, Zeraora. Those are Pokemon that you want to flood your bench with so that they can attack into Snorlax Stall. But because we're not running a copy of Lost Vacuum in our deck, we're unable to Lost Vacuum our Squawk or our Greninja or our Lumineon right away. So if those hit the board, we wanna you know, fix our board up real quick and get those off. Because if they're in the active, they're gonna be probably stuck. Gardevoir EX can be scary at times if they set up and pop off. However, we have the help of Iron Hands EX and a very consistent deck of first turn attacking. So we'll typically able to just go to like 2/2/2 with Iron Hands EX and just shut him down that way. We do have to worry now though about the Monkey Dory in Gardevoir EX. The Monkey Dory is what allows Gardevoir to be more of a threat. Being able to hurt us with Monkey Dory and then clean us up with Gardevoir EX is really annoying. So you want to use our cards like Switch Cart appropriately, and we want to make sure we're taking 2 prizes when we can each turn, or hitting some important Pokemon on their side of the field. Origin from Palkia V-Star, it feels like an auto win just because of Palkia V-Star. However, if they're running the Greninja EX with the fighting type, it does get pretty scary, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, usually Origin from Palkia, we're able to go like 2/2/2 at some point. And yeah, if we're not going 2/2/2 and they're hurting themselves, blowing up their own Dusknoir or whatever, then it means we don't have to amp as hard, I guess. But yeah, Origin from Palkia is a good matchup. Terrapagos EX is another really good matchup for this deck. Terrapagos is the deck that wants to go first, and Miraidon deck here is a deck that wants to go second. So if the Terrapagos player picks first, which they're going to, and we're gonna pick second, like we always should, we will typically be favored like at least 65-35 in the Terrapagos EX. It just depends on how strong their opening turn was in terms of setting up a whole bunch of owls and stuff like that. But we're usually able to go Iron Hands 2/2/2. We're also able to do things like a Zeraora into a Pidgey play, or a Zeraora plus a Zapdos into a Hoot kind of play. We hit for some really great numbers and weakness into a lot of Terrapagos EX, and we're also able to one-shot Terrapagos EX very easily with Raikou V as well. Iron Thorns honestly isn't a real deck anymore. If you see it, it's not that scary though. We don't need to have the Squawk. We just basically go into our Raikou V Miraidon mode and take prizes that way. Our deck is so consistent at setting up, and being able to hit that 230 isn't too hard to do with the Miraidon and Photon Blaster and whatnot. So yeah, just play it smart. Miraidon EX Mirror Match. In the Mirror Match, we always want to go second, and we always want to make sure we're leaving a 1-prizer in the active if we're not taking some big damage or doing some big damage with our own 2-prizers. So don't be the aggressor and go for a 1 prize. The prize map is always 2/2/2. If you deviate from that, you're probably going to lose, because if you take 1, then they're going to go 2/2/2 on you, and there's nothing you can do unless your Iron Hands pops off and takes 3 prizes off of one of their 2-prizers at some point to balance that weird prize route you end up taking. This deck is also very strong into the Mirror Match because we have the help of Regieleki VMAX, and Regieleki VMAX allows us to one-shot a lot of the Pokemon they have on their side of the field. It's also huge, 310 HP. Miraidon EX can't typically handle a one-shot attack for that Pokemon because a lot of them have cut their Raichu Vs. Charizard EX is still a slightly scary matchup because inherently our strategy has always been to take prizes and take them fast, and Charizard EX is strong as you scale its damage output with the amount of prizes we've taken. So when you're playing against Charizard, I find a lot of Charizard players are hardly able to set up these days. They're usually able to get like 1 Charmander at a time. Sometimes it's pretty bad. So in a 2 out of 3, usually one game they just have a really bad brick, and our deck is so strong and so consistent that that if they're bricking, we're gonna take that game off them real quick. In the matchup though, you're gonna want to be very mindful about what Pokemon they have. You're gonna want to usually take down their Pidgey as quick as you can with Pokemon like our Zeraora or our Regieleki V. If they go single Charmander, just always gun down the Charmander as quick as you can. And of course, there's options to sometimes take 3 prize cards off of Pidgeot EX, and you can also take 3 prize cards off of Lumineon V, and then you can also just easily KO their Pokemon like Fezandipiti as well with your Photon Blasters and whatnot. But yeah, in my personal testing of this deck versus Charizard, I think I'm like like 18 wins and 6 losses against Charizard EX. And these days I don't even have Iron Thorns in my deck. So if you're struggling against the Charizard matchup, put in the Iron Thorns. But if you're a well experienced Miraidon player, you don't need to have the cope of the Iron Thorns in your deck anymore. You can just play this deck because it's that much more consistent than Charizard at destroying Charizard too. So yeah. Only put Iron Thorns in if you're really scared of Charizard. Lugia V-Star is a favored matchup for this deck, but you want to make sure you're playing around that Legacy Energy. The Legacy Energy is a huge issue for this deck to fight against because we're not teching for it with like Enhanced Hammer or Temple of Sinnoh. Other big cards we have to worry about in Lugia V-Star include Blood Moon Ursaluna. Blood Moon Ursaluna has 260 HP, so you have to be able to one-shot it with a very big bench of Raikou plus Regieleki VMAX, or of course your Miraidon EX can hit that number of 260 with the help of Regieleki VMAX and a Zapdos on the board. We are favored into Lugia V-Star about 60-40, but yeah, sometimes they're just able to pop off, and if they pop off, Lugia is, you know, one of the best decks in the game when they set up. And if you are scared of the Lugia matchup, you can always have the Iron Thorns EX in your deck like we did for this particular video. This is another crutch card that is good against Lugia, of course for obvious reasons, and Zeraora is a fantastic card against Lugia as well. Zeraora can be a single prize Pokemon we trade in to attack their Lumineon or a Squawkabilly, but also Zeraora with the help of a Regieleki VMAX will swing for 180 into Archeops. So you can snipe a single Archeops with a Zeraora right here, and yeah, pretty clutch. Dragapult EX is another deck that is a harder matchup for Miraidon to handle. You hope that they cut their Defiant band, because if they hit for 230 into your Pokemon, it's pretty annoying. Our prize route to victory for Dragapult EX is usually amp it very much for at least one of the 2 sets of prizes, and then we go 2 prizes on their Rotom, their Lumineon, or their Fezandipiti, and they have a hard time setting up as well these days too. So if you have to gust their only Dreepy on the board, you gust their only Dreepy on the board and you go in for the kill. Some decks do still play the Pidgey, so you can always use the Zeraora as well to gun down their Pidgey if you need to. And of course, the big bad best deck in format, we got Raging Bolt EX, the turbo deck, the king of turbo decks according to everybody out there. We have a favorite matchup into Raging Bolt EX. I'd say it's about a 60-40. So much of it relies on that opening coin toss. The big advantage that Miraidon has over Raging Bolt is that we have a lot of more single prizers that we can feed into the active, and we also can more consistently set up our attacks of Raikou V and Miraidon compared to them having to kind of hit the nuts a little bit sometimes with like Sada and consistent Teal Mask Ogerpon. And Raging Bolt, for example, is another matchup where it is kind of useful to have Iron Thorns EX, because if you are forced to go first, just drop this off and they can't use their Teal Mask Teal Dances anymore, they can't use Squawk either, and just dropping Thorns in is very annoying. And of course, because Raging Bolt plays a lot of 2 prize Pokemon, we're able to bully them like their Teal Mask, like their Squawk and stuff, with the help of our big Raikou V attacks or our Miraidon plus Regieleki VMAX attacks, or sometimes just Miraidon attacks. Raging Bolt doesn't scare me at all, and I actually feel like we're very favored into it with this particular build at least. I hope you have a lot of fun playing Miraidon EX. If you did enjoy this video, found it useful at all, feel free to share it with a friend, hit that like button down below, or feel free to become a channel member or drop a super chat as well to help support my career as a Pokemon trainer and maybe help me hit 50,000 subscribers. Click here to watch the tournament where we played Miraidon with Ampharos EX. You can click here to watch the NAIC Blunder vlog. Good luck in your games. I'll see you later. Peace!